Hi, everyone. Welcome to Discover Hope Podcast. My name is Sarah, and I have the privilege of sharing a first time with all of us today. Today's episode is sponsored in memory of an incredible human being named Rick Enlow. If you had the privilege of knowing Rick, you know how special this moment is. Rick was a husband, a father-in-law, a grandfather, a pastor, a magical thinker, an author, an orator. He recently published a book called Low Hanging Fruit, available on Amazon. And Rick passed away August 1st of 2024. And when I learned of Rick's diagnosis, I literally said to the person when they told me, I said, no, there's no way. And I said to them, there's not a world that I can imagine that Rick Enlow doesn't live in it. And so when his wife reached out to me around the 1-year anniversary of his passing and said, Sarah, I want to sponsor an episode of the podcast in honor of Rick's memory. She said, I know he would be so proud of the way you're using your voice to help others. So Marv, thank you so much. We've been able to communicate on how much this means, but I just want to say thank you. And just before we go into the intro, I wanted to share with you who Rick was to myself and to Sheldon and I. Rick and Gino pastored a church called Harbor Christian Center in Gig Harbor. And when Sheldon and I were planting our church, Hope, Rick and Gino were the church plant coaches. And Rick and Gino, they were one of the first people that we were like, we feel like we could do this. And then, so that was his role in our life. And then when Sheldon passed, it was time to kind of like put together, obviously, his service. And I knew that I wanted to be a main speaker at it. I knew how I wanted it to go, but I definitely wanted to have other people, and I needed to have somebody like champion the whole thing. And when I would tell people about it, I would see the look in their eye like I was crazy, but not Rick. When I told Rick this vision that I had of how I would love Sheldon's service to be, he looked right at me and said, Sarah, let's do it. And so we did. And after Sheldon's service, Rick came up to me and he said, Sarah, you launched today. And, you know, he would check in on the kids and I'd come to their games. He was always so supportive of how they were growing up. And so I thought that we could go into today's episode with one of Rick's famous lines that he would say, it's better this way. So Rick, I honor your life, I honor your impact, and this one's for you. Hey everyone, here we go. Alrighty. Okay, before we get going into today's episode, I wanted to take a minute and check in on a couple things. First of all, thank you all for sharing, liking, commenting, all of those things. We're really starting to pick up traction. And what's been so incredible is I keep getting, DMs, texts, all the things of people saying, oh my gosh, I just shared it with this person, or this person's going through this. And somebody said, like, I hope it's not offensive to you, but I actually told them they might want to start right at episode 7, because episode 7 and 8 are right when I start talking about more of like what I did, versus just the story. And of course, I'm not being sensational just for telling you the story. I just had to obviously I had to talk about what got me here, And so that's been incredible. And thank you guys. And I literally am just starting to get feedback of people saying, my neighbor actually was walking by the house the other day and she said, oh, let me turn off my music. And then she said, she goes, yesterday I was walking by with your voice in my ear because I was listening to the podcast. And she started to share with me, she said, this is how I'm listening to it. She said, she listens to little chunks at a time. And then she processes her grief and her experience and the things that she's, that have brought her here. And I said, thank you for telling me that, because, the way that I'm picturing the podcast right now is it's like if you were sitting in here with me and we were talking about it, and because for the last almost 7.5 years, that's how this story has been. Like somebody'd say like, oh, you get to talking and then all of a sudden I'm just like, and it's, that I'm like checking in with the person's eye, like, how are they doing? Is this too much? Should I stop? And so in this setting, it's so nice to just be able to, like, to me, this is an act of, like, it's a love offering of just this, like here, I'm just depositing this here for anybody that will come by, and hopefully it's helpful. You know what I mean? And so it's been very fascinating for me in that regard to see that, to get the feedback of like how people are processing it or how the information's getting disseminated, or to just share these practical tools, these resources that are out there. Something else that I would love to invite you guys to do is on your phone or anything audio, if you ever wanted to send an email or send a voice note or anything like that we could start interweaving into the podcast of, I could, give me, if you say, yes, you have my permission to share this, then I can read your emails, I can share your voice memos, and just how, like, what happened for you and how is this helping? And because it's like, this is just my experience. And I know, like, I'm learning from you guys, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I never knew that. Or there's such an intricate fabric. Life is in general, but then with grief, and whether if it's death, divorce, disappointment, diagnosis, like, this is a common bond that we all have. And I think as we're evolving more and more, we're creating this language and we're creating a community, really. Like I have like these pictures that in my mind where I could see us having events and having like community collaboratives and just people getting to make friends that have walked this path. And even if it's just for a short time, there's a saying that says people will be with you for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And we're not always meant to travel the long haul with everyone, but just having someone else that understands where you've been, what you've been through in like the concept, I think is such a validating thing. And so anyway, so you would send that to Sarah, SARAH, at discoverhope.org. So it's Sarah at discoverhope.org. You could send an email. You could just say podcast note, podcast email, whatever. I'll get it. Let me know if I could share that, because I'd love to add that layer to the podcast. Okay, so today's episode has been way more emotional than I thought it was going to be. Just due to the season of sorry, I just have to fix there. I've had some wispies on my hair that were kind of getting in my face. Just because of the season of life we're in, as far as like we're ending summer, school's getting ready to start. My oldest son is getting ready to ship out to the Army National Guard boot camp here in 8 weeks. My second born son is starting his redshirt freshman year at University of Idaho on the football team, and working so hard in his mind and spirit to grow. Because it's never about the game, right? It's always about what's going on in here. My daughter's starting her senior year, and I cannot believe that. And then my youngest we just got her registered for junior high. So there's just been a lot of life happening. And Tim's diagnosis, he's still doing amazing. And so anyway, here we are. And so I've had a couple times I've had to reschedule our recordings. And so today I was like, even though I was coming from all over the place, I said to Quentin, our producer, I just said, I'm just going to come in, and even if I use up some of the time just to prep and finish up, that's what I'll do. But I said, I think I'm maybe pushing this episode out just because I think it's ending up being more sensitive than I thought it was going to be. So, And you know what, you guys? I'm actually glad about that sometimes because I'm not a grief expert. I'm not like over here waving like the banner of like, I figured it out. I just happen to be somebody that's got dealt some really hard cards at different points in my life and I'm very gritty. I'm very solution oriented. I'm very positive by nature. And so anyway, I will do anything. My big line, because people would be like, have you considered this? Or have you tried this treatment? Have you tried this modality? I'd say, listen, I'm teasing, but I would say I would do meth if I could keep my teeth to get out of the pain, so there's not a modality that I haven't been willing to try. I am being funny about that regard though. So what we're going to talk about today is a type of therapy called EMDR. It stands for eye movement desensitization reprocessing. And so a little bit of the history of EMDR is it was stumbled upon, believe it or not, back in the 80s by a psychologist and a researcher named Francine Shapiro. And what she did was she happened to be going on a walk and she was thinking about some challenging things going on in her life. And she noticed that when, as she's walking, how you're just kind of like, your eyes are just going back and forth. She noticed that her thoughts were getting processed in a fascinating manner. So being a psychologist and a researcher, what she ended up doing was she went on and, studied like the biology of everything that was going on in the human body when this was happening. And what she discovered was anytime there's bilateral movement on the body, like eyes moving back and forth, so going through the median of the body, the middle section, or your arms going like this, right? So you're crossing over the center line of the body. What happens is if you picture your brain being like a machine or like a computer, what it does is when there's bilateral movement happening, so both sides of the brain being stimulated at the same time, what it does is it pops up the situation that's going on literally to be processed and then to be categorized, essentially. So we'll get into more of that later, but that is like the bare bones of EMDR. So it's June of 2018, and I'll never forget, I was in Gig Harbor, we live in University Place, at the dentist with all 4 kids after Sheldon died. Now, this was not abnormal. I always took the kids to the dentist, still do. Well, they drive themselves now, most of them. And so I'm at the dentist, but it was this very overwhelming feeling, right? Because February, March, April, May, June. So we're going into the 4th month of Sheldon's passing. And my sister Megan calls, she lives in Scottsdale, Arizona. And she's like, hey, Sarah, how's it going? I'm like, it's good. I'm like, I'm actually just taking the kids to the dentist for the first time by myself. I'm like, and I know that feels dramatic, but it's not. This is what I've always done. She goes, no, I understand. I was like, it's like one of those like, so we just go to the dentist now? You know what I mean? Like life felt so meh after Sheldon died, as you can imagine. And so she said, okay, well, do you have a second? And I'm like, yeah. She said, okay. So, and I've talked about Rachel Thomas a lot in the episodes prior. So she's one of my sister's very best friends. She's a therapist down in Scottsdale, Arizona, but she's very amazing. And so she has since built this really large practice. And Rachel had reached out to Megan after Sheldon died and after she helped me through those first, couple immediate days and weeks. And she said, Megan, has Sarah heard of EMDR? And Megan was like, I don't know, I can find out. And what Rachel told Megan was she had never seen a modality be so effective with clients as EMDR. So Megan calls me, she tells me this. And so as you can imagine, I'm like, if just taking my kids to their normal dentist is overwhelming, you can imagine how overwhelming it would be to like, how do I find an EMDR therapist? What is this? And then all the different questions that come along with anything like this. And so I have always thought of, I'm like, I can't wait for the day that I get to share this next piece with people that my sister did. So this is like an effective just tool or practice or step that Megan took with me. And so she was like, would you be willing to go to something like that? And I was like, Meg, I'll do anything. And then she did this. She said, Sarah, would it be helpful if I called around, like found a couple EMDR therapists and called them and checked to see, like, one, do they take your insurance? What is their cash prices? And what is their schedule? Are they taking new patients? And what does it look like to get into them? And I was like, Megan, would you? And she was like, oh my gosh, yes. And so that was whatever. But I'll never forget, she called me that Monday. So I felt like it was a Thursday, but just for the sake of the story. So end of the week, Monday or Tuesday, Megan calls me back. She goes, hey, I think I found who you should go see. And I'm like, who? And she said this person's name. And I said, okay, that sounds great. And I said, what made you pick her? And she said, honestly. And I'm like, yeah. She's like, she's the only one that called me back. And I was like, okay, that works for me because I'm in real estate. My dad was in sales. And when I got into real estate, my dad said, he said this, he said, Bud, you're going to do such a good job. And he's like, but listen to me. You tell Sheldon and the kids, you may not be available to go to everything for the first 12 months, but it's just 12 months. And then he looked at me and said, and answer your freaking phone. Nobody answers their phones anymore. So I was like, okay, Dad. So anyway, when Megan said that about my EMDR therapist, who I ended up seeing, I literally could hear my dad in my head and I was like, done. And she was like, okay, awesome. Here's her name. Here's her number. She's expecting your call. Like, she's not like expecting, but you know what I mean. So I ended up making my appointment to go see her. And what ended up being very special for me was at this point in my healing journey, I didn't want to see a faith-based therapist. And the reason why wasn't because I was angry at God, even though I could be if I wanted to. I didn't want anyone using spiritual means to minimize my experience, if that makes sense. And basically, I didn't want to be put in a box. And I knew that I had a very not typical response to Sheldon's death. But I've said it in another episode. I didn't have the words then, but the words came to me as the years went by. And it was this: I had to get so much bigger than Sheldon's death, because if I didn't, I really think it would have swallowed me whole. And so I was very thankful from my experience that she wasn't like, it wasn't like, you know how some people market themselves in different ways. So she didn't market herself that way. I don't know if she has a spiritual tradition, it didn't matter to me. And then the other thing that was very uncomfortable in the beginning of my therapy with her was she was warm, but my experience of hers was she was very stoic. So just very, like, basically what I'm saying is I couldn't read her. And as I have told the story as the years have gone on, I have said, I think it was so perfect that she was my therapist because I couldn't charm her. And not that I think I'm so charming. It's just more like, like I'm a people person and a recovering people pleaser. I learned this after the fact. So I couldn't like read her face and respond appropriately. So at first it was uncomfortable, but I was so desperate to get help and to heal that I think it's exactly what I needed. So I'll just tell you how, like, you can Google EMDR. There's so much that you can YouTube it, like, explain to me EMDR origin story. What is a session like? I mean, you guys, YouTube's flooded with this, which I think is so helpful. You can chat GPT it. Ultimately, I want to have Rachel on and you will get to share these things. But for now, here we go. So EMDR was historically, and to this day, has been known to help post-traumatic stress disorders. complex PTSD, all those things. But then in the study of it and in its kind of as it's evolving, kind of some questions have come up is, well, what classifies as trauma? Because yes, me witnessing my husband die on a cruise with our 4 kids, traumatic, but so my ears stuck out really bad when I was a kid, but we weren't allowed to tease each other. And so I didn't know my ears stuck out. Like I was actually born without a fold, like the normal fold you have in your ear. And so, but we weren't allowed to tease each other. So I didn't know. So when I was like 5 years old, I was at the park. My sisters were in a softball game and I was playing at the playground with like kids that you just end up making friends on the playground. And I'm getting ready to leave. This goes back to EMDR and the like, what is trauma? My mom comes up, she grabs my hand and says, "Come on, Sarah, we're going to go home." And it was this moment where I distinctly remember seeing myself as an individual because I'm one of 4 kids. And for 3 weeks out of the year, we're 1 year apart. So that means my mom had 4 kids, 3 and under back in the 80s, 70s and 80s. So anyway, all that to say, I'll never forget this memory of my mom grabbing my hand. We're getting ready to walk home. And I'm like, I feel like a big girl. I'm 5 years old. And suddenly these kids yell, "Hey, Sarah." And I had that feeling of like pride of like, oh my gosh, my mom's going to know that I made friends all by myself. My big sisters weren't even here. And I turn around with this big smile on my face and I go, "Yeah." And they go, "I hope your ears don't grow into your nose like walrus tusks." And I was like suddenly I was like, what? Like at first it didn't make sense. And then they were laughing and like, that whole like horrible, like the movie goes, on a movie scene when everything goes quiet and it's still and you're like, what? So anyway, all to say, my dad was such a sweet pea. I had to wait till I was a certain age, but I had my ears fixed when I was 8 years old. Isn't that so sweet? And it was traumatic, but it didn't like ruin me. But you know what I'm saying? My point being though, nobody gets to say what is trauma for you. And it doesn't mean that you're weak. It doesn't mean that you're not capable of taking care of yourself. And, I know that I'm speaking to a demographic. So I would say in my experience, people over 60, talk therapy still can kind of feel like it has a stigma, like something's wrong, or you weren't able to do it on your own, or we just don't talk about that stuff, right? Because definitely if you're in that era, you probably, like statistically, were raised in an environment where it was maybe said or just picked up on that we don't think, we don't feel, we don't talk. Right? You don't tell people about your feelings. You don't you just kind of like grit and bear it. But it's a new day and it's a new era and there's new ways to go about life. And so here we are with EMDR. So I specifically went because, and so I am going to tell you, this next part is detailed. And so if you're on your way to work or if you have kids listening, or I would just say maybe you might want to pause. I'm not going to this is the goal isn't to traumatize you. Of course, I hope you know that by now, but the goal is to share real life experiences in hopes that it could help. So as you may know by now, Sheldon died on a cruise. And it happened so suddenly. He had a heart attack. He was in the shower. And so what would happen was, and you know what, you guys, I might cry moving forward, and I'm just going to let myself, because I don't want to hold back and feel like I'm trying to filter myself. We're talking about grief. We're talking about hard things. I still cry. I still miss him. The pain has changed, right? It's gotten better, but there are moments like taking Cash to junior high today, and we're driving in the parking lot, and I see this spot that Sheldon and I took a selfie with our oldest son, Scout, and I could see the picture right now in my head, and I looked at Cash and I go, "Oh my gosh, Cash, Dad and I stood right there and took a picture with Scout." And part of me is like, I can't believe that that's when Sheldon's role in the kid's life stopped. When our oldest was entering the 8th grade, like, and then now that I'm with my youngest going into 8th grade, I was like, wow. Like, I know the kids were young, but sometimes when you see it in perspective, it's like, wow. And so that's where I'm at today, and that's okay. So what would happen for me after, like, when we got home from the cruise and everything, and mind you, I didn't know anything about EMDR. I didn't know anything about the brain storing memories and organizing memories and all these things. And so it was anytime I was doing something brainless, like doing the dishes, driving, getting ready in the morning. If you have like your morning routine, you could just kind of go into that mode. So anyway, those would be the predominant times. And then out of nowhere, it felt like a scene went on in my head. And all of a sudden, I would hear the noise of what I thought Sheldon was hitting the wall because he was frustrated when he was in the shower. But it's when he had so I would hear Sheldon drop because he had the heart attack. Then I would see me go to the shower and like I would, I just have this moment of like, oh my gosh, what just happened? And then it was like these movie scenes. So I would hear him, I would go to him, and then the next scene, I'm sitting in the hallway. And mind you, all these things actually happened in real life, but this is the way that they would replay in my head anytime like there was this lull in my brain. I'd hear him, I would go to him. The next one was I would be sitting in the hallway. And if you saw that episode, it's where I'm looking up at this crew member, this woman, and I keep saying to her, are they life-flighting him? Are they life-flighting him? Because there was no way my brain was even comprehending that Sheldon died. And then the next scene, essentially, is me when they come out and say he didn't make it. Then I go in and they say, do you want to say goodbye? And I go in and he's laying on the floor with a sheet up to his chest. And I'm just supposed to say goodbye. And so I went to, the woman I saw was a psychiatrist, so she's a doctor. I just want to be sensitive because I haven't asked to say her name. And if I'll shout it from the rooftops, I've sent a lot of people there, but I always want to be so sensitive to people's dignity and their like privacy, I guess. And so when I went to her, I said, I'll just say Dr. Smith. That way I can say, but that's not her name. I said, Dr. Smith, I'm only 4 months into this process. So I obviously don't know what I don't know, but I'm here to tell you that I'm here to work. And I said, I'm capable. I said, I've been to a grief intensive. I've done a lot of personal work on my life. So basically I was like, as hard as you'll hit me in these sessions, like I'm here for it, because I was like, I said, I know I can't circumvent the grief process, but I can't keep living like this. And I'm like, and I have 4 kids. And I said, if there's a chance that we can truly get through this and be okay, I'm here for it. She was kind of like, okay. So we started with, she's just, of course, taking these intake questions and stuff like that. And one of the reasons why I really wanted to share with you the detail of EMDR, like even so normally when I record these episodes, I can usually get 2 done in our time together. But I even said to Quentin, I'm like, I'm really not going to push myself to like crank out episodes, because that's not what this is about. So if today's might be a little bit longer, but it's because I really want to share this whole process with you, because my heart would be that as many people as possible would find themselves getting EMDR therapy, because it's like brain, guys. It's not like you just go sit there and talk and be like, when people say, well, what would I go talk to a therapist for? What are they going to say? How are you doing? crappy. How do you think I'm doing? And like, that's the beautiful thing about EMDR. It's very sequential. So as I understand it and as I experienced it, and then each of my kids did it as well, they say you would typically go for like a particular like process for 6 to 7 sessions. So it's very like specific in the questions that they ask. And so why I want to tell you that is because you're like, well, I don't even know what I would say, or I don't want to cry in front of them, or I would say all you would have to do is show up and they'll take care of any therapist. That's been my experience. But specifically with EMDR, like you just would have to show up and they will take care of the rest. So we did the first session and I think I booked them like on a Tuesday and Thursday. Like that's just how I did them. Cause I was like, I didn't want to like suffer for like week to week to week. So I go in, do that first appointment, and so she's asking different questions. And then, she's like, okay, so this got us like set up. Like, she's like, Sarah, I know this can seem crazy, but I want you to know that like the work has been activated in you. She was, and again, I know this can seem crazy, but this isn't like woo woo. This is actual science. And so here's what she said. She said, I know, because I said, I'm here to process these specific 4 loops that would happen. I said, Dr. Smith, I'll just be like washing the dishes, and all of a sudden I'll hear that noise. I'll see myself seeing him. I'll be in the hallway, and then I'm trying to say goodbye to him. And then I literally will go like this, whew, like just kind of like shake myself. And then I'm like back to washing dishes. I'm like, she goes, yeah, no, I hear you. So she said, here's what I want you to know though. And this is amazing. I'm so excited to share this with you. She said, the brain is like an archaeologist. And so she said, I know you're here to process the technicality of Sheldon's death. You know you're here for that reason. But the brain might have other things that it needs to get processed before it can get to that. So I was like, okay. So she said, don't be surprised if you have a really clear thought. Don't be surprised if you have a dream. Don't be surprised. She said, and she's the beautiful human being that taught me this. She would say, notice that. Notice. I would be talking and she'd go, notice that. And basically what she was doing is she was helping me connect to my intuition, or what people would call their spirit or their soul, or what spiritual directors call the deep knowing within you. Because we all have that, you guys. We came to this planet like wired, and then it's these different experiences that we've had along the way that have changed our programming. But I'm here to tell you, we can get back or we can become the best versions of ourselves. I'm telling you, I'm living proof of that. So what she said is, she goes, Sarah, so the brain, we've already activated it. And what'll happen, like in a picture, is the brain's going to pop up the memory that it needs to process. And then what'll happen is it'll then kind of like on Inside Out, though Inside Out isn't mimicking EMDR. It is giving you the picture, the Inside Out, the Pixar cartoon is what I'm referring to. It's giving the picture that feelings are feel like anger, sadness, joy have expressions in the body, and they're like orbs, So anyway, Dr. Smith says it'll pop it up. And then she said what it'll do is it'll go, oh, okay, you had this memory. And then it'll go, oh, that goes into my sadness file. Or that goes in, when I was a kid, that goes into being humiliated. And am I enough, And she said, and some memories, like somebody could have called you a name when you were a kid, or totally joking, but that has become like your name tag. And it's you could not even know that you're walking around right now because somebody said something in like love, but you took it as a teasing and like a put down, and that's become like your identity. I mean, you guys, this stuff is amazing. So in my experience with EMDR, they can use a light bar, which is like literally a light doing like lighting going like this, and then you follow it with your eyes. They can use like a pointer where you're just like following, and again, it's just to get the brain to stimulate on both sides, the bilateral movement. Also, they've used these like little vibrating buzzy pads or whatever they're called. And it would feel no different than a cell phone, like a bzz, bzz, bzz. And typically they'll do that for like 30 seconds and then they'll ask these questions or invite these responses. And so before I'm leaving this first appointment, Dr. Smith says, she explains that whole thing. And then she says, okay, Sarah, why don't I'm just going to check in with you and see where you're at. So she gets out like this telescopic like pointer thing. So she's like pulling it out and she sends it across the room, to me. So I'm following it and I'm following it with my eyes. And like, I had this overwhelming sense to just like shut them. I could not keep my eyes open. And because I process everything out loud, I go, oh my gosh, I can't keep my eyes open. And I feel like I'm going to fall asleep. Well, unbeknownst to me, that's a complete sign of like activated trauma. So she's like, oh, okay. When somebody's trying to act calm in the room, she's like, yeah, we're going to go ahead and pull this back in. And so she, wished me well. And then this is like a little shared thing that I want to share with you is what I ended up doing for myself was when I knew that I was going to had like a big thing to process or like these appointments when I just felt like, I don't know if I could do this in an hour. I would actually ask if I could book 2, and I know I was going to get billed. And listen, I don't want to make shy that this could be expensive, but you guys, it doesn't have to be terribly expensive, and you're worth it. You're so worth it. And so I would book these 2-hour blocks because I never want to bother anyone. Like that is something like if I feel like I'm bothering you by talking too much, like that even makes me want to cry right now. I'll just shut down. And I didn't want to put myself in an environment where I felt like it was like, okay, Sarah, that's enough. You know what I mean? So I said, Dr. Smith, even if I don't use the full 2 hours, I'm happy to pay for them because I don't want to put myself in that setting. So she's like, okay, great. So this is crazy. So, I leave that appointment, go home, and I had even told her, I think I had told her, but anyway. So when I was a kid, I had this experience and like it had gotten taken care of. But what I found as I grew up, this experience I had as a kid would always get brought up in counseling. So Sheldon and I actually just were very proactive in our relationship and as individuals. So he actually called therapists personal friends because he was like, everyone should have a professional friend. As somebody you're paying them to listen to you. But he would always tell people, don't wait until your life hits the wall to establish a relationship somewhere if you don't have to. Like, go get check-ins. Like, go, Tim and I go for our marriage. Sheldon and I went for our marriage. We go as individuals. Like, it's kind of like mental health maintenance, So anyway, whenever I would, establish care with a new therapist, if we moved or whatever, this one particular incident of my childhood would come up. And I would even find myself saying to them, oh, that's surprising I even just told you that because I've dealt with that. And it's been like, as much as it can get taken care of, it's taken care of. And so honestly, this thing had been with me for probably 35 years at this point that I'm now doing EMDR. So remember when Dr. Myers said, like, you could have a dream, you could have a really clear thought, you could have a message that you're like, whoa, that wasn't me. Sorry, I just kind of caught myself on something. So anyway, I'll just move on. So what ended up happening is that night I had a dream, and I'm not somebody that if I dream, I don't know because I don't at least remember my dreams. And so I went to bed that night, not thinking anything, ended up having this dream. And you guys, this is how uncomplicated EMDR is. So in my dream, I'm walking by one of my childhood homes, and this house wasn't even the age that I was, you know what I mean? It was just a home from my childhood. And I'm an adult walking by that home, and I know this thing is happening. And I simply stop and I look at the house and I go, that shouldn't be happening. And please don't try to read any more into that because it's so not even, what I just described isn't even in context of anything that had happened. But basically, it was like me as an adult was was aware of this, me, the little girl, and was saying like that experience that I had in my childhood shouldn't have happened. And you guys, I woke up and I, had that all play out. And I'm not kidding you. It's like that thing is done. So it's like Dr. Smith had said, she was like, the brain will bring up that's what she meant when she said the brain's like an archaeologist. It will get to the thing that it needs to get to in order to get to the thing that you want to get to. And you know what? Because this is what she said. She said, Sarah, we are designed to heal. But the problem with healing is it hurts. It takes time. It's not a clear path. And she said, but the brain was designed to heal. But what happens, for me, I lived 35 years with knowing that this shouldn't have happened, but I wasn't at peace with it, if that makes sense. And so here I am after this one session that I'm not talking anything about this, but that's what my brain needed. And how, when I talked to her later about it, she said, she said, it's kind of like, if you can imagine, like if a piece of gravel got stuck in a tire rim, or it's like having a piece of gravel stuck in your brain and you're like, ooh, and you just go, oh yeah, I don't think about that. Or, we excuse it away, or we beat ourselves up. That's what I do. I beat myself up all the time. But I've gotten so much better about it because I'm aware of it now. And I'm aware that I don't have to live like that or suffer like that, So that's like the big picture of EMDR. So now I'm going to tell you about how this all got processed for me. And you guys, I actually got out my journal from June. So this was June 30th of 2018. And honestly, I've been I don't go back and look at this stuff a lot because it's sad, and it's not that it's okay to be sad, but it's I don't want to make myself be sad, but obviously for this moment, these feelings are necessary to be brought up. Oh, and then I did want to share this with you. Since starting the podcast, and as I'm going into these places that I don't go every day, and then sharing them like this, and then hearing about them again, and then, all the pieces now that the podcast is out, I've become aware of some areas that I feel like I'm a little bit stunted in with my life. I've just noticed some stuff, and I don't even mind being transparent with you. Because my life changed so much when Sheldon died, and because when someone dies, your social life, my social life changed, right? Where we were friends with couples, suddenly I'm just no plus one. You know what I mean? And that's what I learned is that's normal. Because the people that we were friends with, their life changed too. They lost Sheldon too. So it's this whole new integration. And so that's actually what's happening when we're going through grief is Sheldon was my husband. He was the father of my kids. He was my best friend. He was the pastor of our church. He was he was my business partner. He was my lover. He was my confidant. He was my fighting buddy. You know what I mean? Your person is so many different roles in your life. And as my brain is looking at my life now going, how is this? This is all those parts of me are now gone. But then my old brain is going, but you had that. And so what I actually ended up learning in the studying for this podcast was it's the orbital cortex of our brain is actually malfunctioning. So when we say grief brain is real, and it doesn't matter if it's death, it doesn't have to be death, you guys. You could have gone through divorce, disappointment, or a diagnosis, but it's when your current reality doesn't match up with what you knew. It's it's like a robot being cannot compute. That's why I keep wanting to remind you, you're not weak. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not like, oh man, I thought, this is what I would say to myself in the beginning. Like, I thought I'd be better than this. Like, better than what, Sarah? Have you ever gone through this before? No, So, okay, how did I get there? Oh, because one of the things I noticed is I am interesting with friends. It makes me want to cry right now because I've noticed that I can go about this far in my friendships. And then it's like there's a wall that I'm like, I know. It's like, now I don't know if you're going to be there. I don't know if we're going to, and here's the thing. It's like I said earlier, people are with us for a reason, a season, and a lifetime. Not everybody's going to journey with you forever. Not everybody's meant to be with me forever. It's like, but I have a hard time letting go. And so I actually booked an appointment with a new EMDR therapist. She's in Gig Harbor. We have our intake call on Monday, and I have my first appointment set with her on September 4th. And I'm sharing that with you because I want to be a person that's like, practicing what I preach, right? I want to lead by example. Like, I'm not just saying like, 7 years ago I did this. I'm saying like, no, I'm actively pursuing, like I've known that I'm kind of interesting with friendships. But now I'm like, oh no, this is probably more of a problem. This isn't just interesting. This is, it's limiting. And I want to have rich friendships, and I want to be able to let friendships change and let go and welcome new people. And I am a little bit awkward, believe it or not. So, and then I'm like, oh, I'm gonna have to go through the awkward stage of new friendships. And I don't like that, but I want to be willing to, because I want to have meaningful friendships in my life. I can't just keep saying like, oh, the kids. It's like, I only have 2 kids at home now. And one of them's a senior and the other one's going into junior high. So it's time for me to grow. So let's go back to June of 2018. And I actually am going to read some of this, you guys. And it is very personal, but it's also beautiful. So the way I describe it is my experience was I said, okay, I'm ready to process these. And so I had the little vibrating buzzer things, and she would turn it on, and I would say to her, I'm like, okay, I don't even know how this works, but I'm going to just think about the first one, which was when I heard Sheldon have a heart attack and drop in the shower. And so the way I'm going to tell it to you, is the way I've told it for 7 years, is I would say I had the front of my brain experience, which was what me in real life, this is what actively happened. And then in EMDR, I had my back of the brain experience, what I would call like my subconscious. But I wasn't aware of this. So on February 24th of 2018, I didn't know this was happening. But then fast forward to June of 2018, it was like the integration was happening, you guys, and that's where the healing happened. And so I'm going to read it. So the first memory, I got to push this out, this is how I wrote it. So this is how I'll just say it. It's him in the shower. So in real life, I go to him in the shower. But here I am in EMDR, and it's like that scene is activated. And as I'm in EMDR, I notice that I'm surprised at this new memory. And this is what the back of my brain said. Yep, it finally happened. Me standing in the door jamb, knowing there is nothing to fix. He isn't here anymore. And you guys might be like, what are you even talking about? But you guys, when I knew Sheldon and during our marriage, I would have what I would call daymares. And I would like literally be driving, and out of nowhere, I'd have a flash, and I would like see myself doing his, me doing his celebration of life service. And then I would be like, oh my gosh, what's wrong with me? Like, why would I would just be like, I literally can picture driving on Highway 16, going like towards the 5. And then I would just like shake my head and be like, what is wrong with me? Why would I be having that thought? Like, and I'm being funny, but it's like, we're not even fighting. Like, but it would just be this, Like I would every now and then, I even told Sheldon, I was like, are you okay? Like sometimes I have these weird flashes, and I would call them daymares, like a nightmare, a daymare. And like every now and then I'll just have this weird flash where I see me doing your memorial. And he's like, oh, that's weird. And I'm like, I know, right? And then off you go, because how do you integrate that into your life? But basically in my EMDR session, it was, I don't know you guys, but this is how it landed for me. Did somewhere in my body I know that this was going to happen? I don't know, but that is the first thought I had. Like the whole picture was me. And so in real life, I went and I jumped on him and I was like, Sheldon, Sheldon. But in my EMDR experience, I went running to him, and it's like there was a force field in the, like against the shower, and I stopped and I just went, oh, and that's what I heard. Like, oh, this day's not like finally here. That sounds very cold, but I know, you know what I mean? Like, oh, this day's here. Like, oh yeah, I knew this day was coming, but I didn't, you know that. And then me saying that there's nothing to fix. He's not here anymore. And because there was a little bit of me that was haunted when he died, that I didn't scream. I didn't, you see in movies like, no, don't go. And I never said that. And I felt like that was my spirit's way of putting me at ease, of like, there was nothing I could have done. Like, that's a lot of pressure. That's a really big burden. If I would be living to this day to think that I could have changed someone's outcome of when they die, like that's a lot of a burden. And I'm so thankful that I don't live like that. So then I would tell Dr. Myers, oh, I said her name. Okay. Well, anyway, I would say, I would come up from this, I would tell her that whole thing, and I'd be like, okay, the next one. And she's like, so your session doesn't have to be as aggressive as mine was, but I was like, I'm like, how do you stop? Like, okay, I'll do the next one next Tuesday. And so the second one was me in the hallway. Because, in real life, when everybody came in, I just kind of got bumped out into the hallway. And it kind of haunted me that I never like clawed my way back into our room to be like, and fight for his life. And it's me in the hallway. And then I wrote it down. It's a new memory. And this is what I say to myself, sitting there quietly, instead of looking at that crew member and saying, are they life flighting him? Are they life flighting him? I say, I can do this. And I'm drawing strength for myself. It's the first time in my life I'm not attached to someone else's purpose or memory. Can you believe that? And I feel the strength in my core. And can you believe that this was June 30th. So February 24th, February, March, April, May. So this is 4 months after he died. I'm already giving myself this affirmation and this confidence and this validation. That's the word I'm looking for. So I know what I saw and what I experienced that day on the cruise, but then there in my subconscious, in the core of me, was my voice saying, you can do this, and drawing strength for myself. Like, that's kind of crazy if you ask me, because could you imagine 7.5 years later, and I'm not that there would be anything wrong with feeling weak or feeling like this shouldn't have happened, but to me, all that would be is suffering. And if I picture Sheldon looking at me from where he is and seeing me just suffer and lonely and sad, like, I'm sure that would have broken his heart. You know what I mean? So, okay, this one is, well, the word that comes to mind is special, but I just want to acknowledge that this could be like, whoa. So this third one, I'm writing it down like this. This next one is when they came out and said he didn't make it. And then they're saying, come on, you could say bye to him. And I just was like, when I learned that like the brain is trying to integrate what is and what was, and I'm talking within 45 minutes, 30 minutes. And so when I went into him, in real life, I just got down on the floor and I laid next to him. And I just kept saying, I said, thank you for being so kind to me. I just kept saying, Sheldon, you were so kind to me. Thank you for being so kind to me. Thank you for loving me. And I don't even remember like how all of that changed in real life. And it's kind of like, thank God, you know what I mean? Because it's like, how do you say goodbye? And I didn't get to say goodbye. And that was the thing that was so, like, we talked about everything. And when I went into this appointment with the doctor, I said, we didn't get to talk about this. Like, not like I could have had anything change the outcome, but we certainly didn't agree with it, didn't agree to it, but we didn't get to say goodbye. And so this is super interesting, and I hope you can like capture this with me. So as I mentioned, like in real life, I go lay down next to him. So in my EMDR, I'm laying next to him, and I say to him, this is in my EMDR, I say to him, why didn't you listen to me? And in my EMDR, he wakes up. And Sheldon had this way of his humor. He wasn't inappropriate, like gross. He just would say the thing that everybody else was thinking, but he would say it. And then, it did jar the room often. And then he was Portuguese, had this huge smile, these huge eyes, and be like, and just kind of stared at you until you broke and you started laughing. And so I'm in my EMDR as in real life, I'm crying and I'm saying, why didn't you listen to me? And more on that later. But he wakes up in the EMDR and he's looking down at me, and with that humor, he goes, I know, right? And we kind of start giggling in this EMDR moment that I'm having. And but he looks down at me and he said, but it's better this way. And then remember how I said that at the beginning of the episode that Rick Enlow said that? And I didn't know that Rick Enlow said that until he passed. So I just thought that was special. He says, it's better this way. And then I say to him, but I don't want it this way. I would have done this with you for another 50 years. And he says, I know. And he looks at me and he goes, and hey, don't ever give yourself away like that again. And in my EMDR, I got embarrassed. I just remembered feeling like super vulnerable. And I say, what do you mean? What's wrong with me that I would do that? And in the episodes prior to this, I talk about how Sheldon was a pastor. Sorry, you guys, I'm just got stuff all over my face. And I'm just like doing it. I talk about how Sheldon didn't know and I didn't know, but essentially I had really abandoned my own personal life for his role as a pastor. He didn't ask that of me. It was kind of the era of church life. And if you know, you know, and I don't know what it's like now, but it just was kind of a cluster of things, but it wasn't like I was this submissive, like, okay, honey. It just kind of was the era, and it just was what it was. So that's when he said that, that's what I knew he meant. He said, when he said, don't ever give yourself away like that again. And I say, what's wrong with me that I would do that? And he says, I say, just as kind as usual, Sheldon said, I don't think it's something wrong. I just think there's a better way. And I said, I don't want a better way. I want you. And he said, I know you do, but I'm gone now. And I promise it's going to be better, much better. I say back to him, but I don't know how. And he says, all of your hard work's going to pay off. But remember, You can't work to get this, Sarah. It's just going to happen. And then it's like I'm able to tell him, if that is, sorry guys, I said, well, if that's the case, and if you're okay, I can let you go. I can let you go. But please know this is not how I would have wanted it. And he said, I know, babe. And then he was always a teaser. And he said, that's why I'm leaving first. And I said, I love you, Sheldon. I love you. I love you. I love you. And that was my EMDR. And, I've thought long and hard about if I was going to share all of that with you. And I thought like, oh my gosh, I've shared some of this with my kids, but I will tell them I always tell them before it comes out, hey guys, this one is a little bit more sensitive. And I don't, expect them to listen. What's so sweet is like a lot of their friends do too. And they do. And you guys, I just wanted to say, whatever age you are, I think it blows my mind that people take time to listen. So, but I wanted to share the rawness of this, you guys, because could you imagine if I was still living today and I felt like I got to have a closure, and I am telling you, oh my gosh, the way I'll never forget, I was wearing like this army green scoop neck like t-shirt in that session. And if anybody's of the age that they know Pong, it was like a video game, like an old school video game. And the bar would open up and get bigger, and then the ball would bounce off of it. I would tell people like, oh my gosh, you guys, it's like my tear ducts turned into like Pong things, because it felt like my tear ducts went from here to my ears, and just sheets of water were pouring out of me. Like my shirt was soaked when I got done with that session, because I just let it rip in that session. And you know what was amazing? Not one time did I even think of Dr. Smith. I didn't. It was like it's like you get to get out of yourself, and you get to get into this realm that's like biology. So what happens in EMDR, and then we'll wrap it up, is this. So at the center of our brain, we have the amygdala, and the amygdala is like the emotional alarm system. So like if you're someone that you hear a door slam and it jars you, or you hear a song, or you'll have like a morbid reflection where you have that memory come back of the thing you did that so haunts you, it's like that's centered in the amygdala. Now, the hippocampus, that is another part of the brain that's right next door to the amygdala. And the hippocampus' job in this setting is to file these memory things, like the doctor had talked about, like the marble going down into the place that it will exist or go out of your body and be done with. But what happens when someone's I don't like the word triggered. I should have done a better study on the word triggered, but I would put it this way: when you're activated with trauma, disappointment, sadness, anger, essentially what happens is if your brain was a computer, it's offline. So that's like the fight, flight, freeze, fawn situation. And what happens when the amygdala is activated, and it's like alarm, alarm, because its job is to keep you safe. And so when it's having these memories come up or all these different things, you're not at a state of ease. And so the hippocampus, what happens in that setting when the alarm system's going off, picture it like a very distressed filer, and it can't file the emotions and the memories in the correct file blanks. That's why you can feel out of it. You can feel scrambled. You can just stay in anger, stay in sadness, stay in withdrawal, stay in isolation, all the things, stay in addiction, all these things. So it's your brain, and the brain is an organ. So if your kidneys needed help, you would hopefully get the help. If your bone was broken, you would. If you had a heart condition, you would. we're evolving now to acknowledge that mental health is real and our mental state is important, most important. And so that's why I wanted to share this with you, to know, to be able to give a first row seat of my own experience. Like, you can go online and listen to a bunch of other ones. But more importantly, I want you to know that healing is available. Healing is possible. Healing takes time. You don't have to do it alone. If you are the loved one of somebody going through a situation of death, divorce, disappointment, diagnosis, be a Megan. Like, do you know how many people I have said that to? Like, my sister said this to me. It was the most helpful thing. Would it be helpful if I made some calls? Would it be helpful if I called that person and checked their schedule? But because offering help is incredible, because then it gives the person something to latch onto. You know what I mean? Oh, thanks for being here, guys. Like I said before, it blows my mind that you're here. I'm thankful you're here. I'm very excited for our next episode. It's where I get to share with you my 12-step story. And if you know me in real life or a peripheral of my life, you will know that the 12 steps and the whole recovery world has become like a second life for me. And I'm excited to, I think you might be surprised of how I came into recovery. And I can't wait to share it with you. I say this, the 12 steps are to the brain what the Bible is to my spirit. And I cannot wait to share that with you. Tune in next time. Thanks for being here. See you then. All right, before we go, if Discover Hope has helped you or encouraged you at all, I wanted to invite you to be a part of the bigger picture. One way you could do that would be by subscribing, liking, or sharing any of the episodes with someone you think might benefit from it, or even on your social media platforms. Another way you could do this, if you'd like to make a donation or even sponsor an episode on behalf of someone you love, you can do that by clicking the link to discoverhope.org below, or you can head on over to our website where you can make donations there or also sponsor at discoverhope.org. You guys, thank you for being a part of this. It's a dream come true. And I truly believe that we are giving grief a language and making room for an abundant amount of hope. Thanks so much.